Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the September statewide call of this California Alliance for Community Energy. I'll introduce our speaker in a moment, but first, our vision statement. The California Alliance for Community Energy envisions a community-based and democratized energy system which promotes affordable, resilient, local renewable energy resources, prioritizing low-income communities that have historically suffered inequitable access to essentials such as affordable energy and healthy community. Our speaker today is Dr. Jose Torre-Bueno, Executive Director, Center for Community Energy, and a fellow steering committee member. His presentation is entitled, How Bidirectional EV Charging Can Reduce Transmission Needs. We all know how important this is as transmission costs drive electric rates higher and higher. Jose has long recognized and championed the benefits of bidirectional charging. For example, I heard him back in October 2022 at a Slow Climate Coalition webinar where he presented his paper, V2G, as a method to control the duck curve, the importance of bidirectional charging. Thankfully for us all, he's continued to research and point out the potential benefits of bidirectional charging. I look forward to hearing from Jose on his vision. Jose, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Just a word about the Center for Community Energy. We're a small nonprofit focusing on addressing energy issues, specifically decarbonization, by promoting electrification and what we call distributed energy resources, specifically by having basically the same goals that we just enunciated there, putting control of energy in the hands of the local communities. We are also an intervener before the Public Utility Commission, and much of what I'm going to talk about is the concepts that we're trying to promote to the Public Utility Commission as an alternative to the vision of just giving the utilities ever more money. I don't think I have to explain to this group about California's decarbonization goals, which involve electrifying basically everything, transportation and electricity generation and buildings. Yes, it's going to require a lot more electricity. I would suggest that having more electricity per se is not that hard, because solar is now the least costly form of electricity generation ever invented, and also the quickest to implement. The problem is having it available when we need it. This is the famous duck curve, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. The issue is, of course, electricity requirements reach their peak in the evening. The upper curve is the total demand in California as a function of time of day. The lower curve is the famous duck curve, the demand exclusive of renewables, or the demand that has to be met by non-renewable resources. And this ramp in the evening when the sun goes down is what the people who are responsible for managing the grid on a moment-to-moment basis, gnash their teeth about every evening. What's not so well known is that the duck curve is primarily driven by residential load. This is my local utility, SDG&E's load on an August week, the last year. What it's showing, it's divided up by classes of customers. And what it's telling us is all the different commercial and industrial classes are rolling off in the evening. Not surprising, most of them close at 5. But the residential customers, which is the dark blue curve, goes through this crazy gyration. Since rooftop solar is behind the meter, it appears to SDG&E as a reduction in load. So from SDG&E's point of view, residential load, there's enough rooftop solar in San Diego that residential load appears to go almost to 0 in the middle of the day. And then in the evening, when the sun sets and everybody gets home and turns on their air conditioner and all their appliances, the residential load shoots up to become by far the predominant load in SDG&E's territory. So the duck curve is in some sense a residential problem, and that'll be important as they go on. So the future of the grid. we're saying that we're going to decarbonize California by having a lot more electricity, and the state agencies that model these things have calculated that we're going to need 57 more gigawatts of generation. It's going to all be renewable. We decided we're never going to build any more fossil fuel plants. By 2035, 115 gigawatts by 2045. In the CPUC's model, much of this is going to be out in the desert or even out of state. A little bit of financial modeling says we're talking about more than 100 billion. We're also, since this stuff is all remote, we're going to have to spend something on the order of 75 billion in new long distance transmission lines. We're also going to have to upgrade the local distribution system. The CPUC commissioned a study, and they concluded that the substations will have to be upgraded, the local distribution circuits will have to be upgraded, the transformers serving buildings will have to be upgraded. That came out to about $50 billion. Some politician once said, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, pretty soon you're talking about real money. Since the only way this ever gets paid for is by giving the utilities a rate increase, the last general rate case that the utilities submitted, they averaged out to about 10% per year going forward. So, and work that out, it comes out to doubling every 8 years. We already have the most expensive electricity. In fact, this is being argued as a reason not to electrify buildings and not to electrify transportation, because it would make electricity unaffordable. And it would take away the cost benefit of electric cars. So this is arguably not a successful way to go. But anyway, this is my infographic about the vision that the CPUC is following. First of all, right now you get a huge discount for charging your electric car during the night. But that works when electric cars aren't that common. But really, you're charging the electric car with fossil fuel if you charge it at night. So long term, they want to take away those rates. They're going to rejigger the rates and encourage people to charge during the day when solar power is abundant. They've coined the term the EV happy hour. But in their modeling, they're assuming that building electrification and transportation electrification are additive loads. And in their vision, they're going to essentially pay the utilities to build new remote utility scale wind and solar, utility scale batteries to power the state in the evening. Because the utility scale generation is remote, there's going to have to be this investment in new transmission. The fossil fuel plants won't go away because they're needed as backup, what's called resource adequacy. And even the last remaining nuclear plant they wanted to keep online. So the people who own them are going to get paid basically to keep them. And then there's all this issue that the local distribution system needs to be upgraded. And this whole issue of everything needs to be an upgrade is especially acute in multi-unit housing, because in multi-unit housing, the average service per unit might only be 70 amps. So if you start going through the calculation and saying, well, we're going to add a heat pump water heater, well, that's minimum 30 amps and maximum 50 to 70 amps. And a charger is a minimum of 30 amps and maybe up to 50 amps. Well, by the time you add those things in, there's no way that the building's electrical service is adequate. So you get into, oh, we have this very expensive upgrade of the building. Now we've added so much load to the building, we have to upgrade the transformer. If we upgrade a bunch of transformers on the same circuit, now we have to upgrade the circuit, the feeder circuit. We upgrade a bunch of feeder circuits. Now we have to upgrade the substation. That's how we get this cascade of upgrades, which is going to cost $50 billion. And you get into this issue of, if this is going to be so expensive, the last buildings getting upgraded are going to be the lowest income housing. So the people who can least afford it are going to be stuck not getting upgraded. So they're not going to be able to charge an electric car. So they're going to be stuck in the future when, internal combustion engines are passe and you can't hardly get one serviced, they're going to be stuck with them. So there's a social justice issue here about people getting left behind in the transition. So there's a great deal of hand wringing and angst in the, people who are supposed to be planning this about how this transition is going to get paid for. So, oops, I went the wrong way. Anyway, we are promoting an alternative, and this is really the core of what I'm trying to say. Our alternative is to say, if they want electric vehicles charged during the day, we should be putting the electric generation where the cars are during the day, where they're parked. And that's over parking lots, which certainly California has an overabundance of parking lots. So we're promoting the idea of carport mounted solar arrays owned by local businesses. Now, the immediate answer is, well, it's more expensive to build a carport mounted solar array than a ground mount solar array, which is indubitably true, just because it needs more material to hold it up. But that's because people aren't thinking about the cost of the transmission. If you factor in the cost of the transmission, we contend that it's actually more cost effective. And the thing is that I used to be in this business, and if you calculate, I'm going to build this solar array, and if I'm going to put the energy into the building during the day when electricity is cheap, then I'm only displacing electricity, which is maybe 11 cents a kilowatt hour. But if I sell the electricity to parked cars, I can get 40 cents a kilowatt hour. That makes the whole proposition much more cost effective for somebody who owns a parking lot. And the other thing, and this is where bidirectional cars become critical. If I have a bidirectional car and I'm parked at work and I can buy electricity for 40 cents a kilowatt hour, and I drive it home and I have a bidirectional charger at home, and I can power the house from my car for the hours from 4 to 9 when electricity is 70 or 80 cents a kilowatt hour, I'm saving myself money. So this is a win-win. The critical thing, which as far as we can tell, nobody's appreciated yet, is that a bidirectional electric car can not only store energy from the middle of the day when solar power is abundant, to the evening when we have this critical shortage of power. It's also a form of transmission. When the cars drive home from where they were charged at work to home where the energy is needed, they're a form of transmission. And that makes all this business about, oh, we have to spend all these billions of dollars upgrading this distribution system moot. That's why I've shown it grayed out here. And especially in multi-unit housing, if a bunch of cars drive home charged, they could plug into bidirectional chargers at the multi-unit housing and power the energy hungry things in the multi-unit housing and obviate the need to upgrade the transformer on the street and sell electricity to the landlord and actually make it a winning proposition for the tenants. So there's a possible win-win for everybody, I guess, except the utilities here. If the generation of electricity becomes something done by local people and the cars become the form of transmission. So this, a little bit of, quick calculation says this is entirely doable. In this model, the cars are charging every day. Quick assumptions. Assume the 30-mile commute, that's the average commute in the United States, needs 10 kilowatt hours. That's the average efficiency of EVs. And assume that the home usage for the 5 hours is 9.6 kilowatt hours. That's 2 times the average for SDG&E. That makes a daily requirement of 20 kilowatt hours. That's only 26% of the battery capacity of a typical EV today. A slow charger, 30 amp charger, that's the slowest of all chargers, of the 2 chargers, could do that in 2.8 hours. So there's plenty of time for a car to charge at work. This graph here is the average occupancy of parking lots from a statistical study done by the National Transportation Authority. So there's plenty of time for cars to charge at work. So in this model, we don't have a couple of fast chargers that people have to shuffle in. We have a very cheap charger at each position. So everybody just plugs in when they arrive at work and leaves the car all day. And we avoid the shuffle, and we avoid having expensive chargers. People have thought of various models about how electric cars charge. The charging at home is now being discouraged because it means charging at night with fossil fuel power. People have imagined a sort of a gas station model where you go once a week and charge up on a very fast charger. The trouble is that that's expensive. It requires bringing new power to gas stations. And it's actually harder on the car. This model where the car charges and discharges a little bit each day is actually, from recent studies, easier on the battery. So remember I said we're trying to make the requirement to upgrade the local distribution system move. So our organization has actually done some modeling of this. This is a actual SDG&E circuit, which was scheduled for upgrade. What I'm showing here is the thin blue line is the worst case load on that circuit as a function of hour of the day. And the gold line is the 90% threshold for the maximum capacity of that circuit. So this circuit was chosen because the worst case, it's already reaching 90% capacity. And the fat orange line is what SDG&E anticipates that circuit is going to be at in 2030. So SDG&E's modeling said this circuit is going to be above the 90% threshold by 2030. So they've scheduled this circuit to be upgraded. This is a local distribution circuit serving, I didn't record it, but a couple of maybe 1,000 something houses and a few businesses. So under the rules of the Public Utility Commission, the utilities can self-certify an upgrade to a local circuit. That means that if they think it's going to exceed its capacity, they can go ahead and spend the money to upgrade it. And if it's an underground circuit, we're talking millions of dollars. And then they can go and add that to their expenses. And when they get it to their rate case, they can go back to the CPUC and go, oh, well, we spent all this money. We're entitled to a rate increase. So this is on a list that SDG&E publishes of circuits that they're going to upgrade. So what we modeled, the green line with the diamonds, is what the load on this circuit could be held to if 7% of the homes on this circuit had a bidirectional EV. And when the EVs got home and plugged into a bidirectional charger, they were asked to give up enough of the charge in their batteries into the house they were plugged into to keep the circuit from exceeding the 90% threshold. And what we did is we had a program that cycled how many EVs there were and asked, what's the fewest number of EVs that could keep the circuit from exceeding the 90% threshold? And rather to our surprise, the answer comes out, it only takes 7% of the homes having a bidirectional EV to keep the circuit from exceeding the 90% threshold in 2030. And we thought it would be, oh, you had to have 80% of the houses have an EV or something. But it doesn't take a lot. And we can do the same analysis on a citywide basis. This is, in this case, the orange line, the blue line is the current load in all of San Diego. This is now in millions of kilowatts. So the blue line is the total load in all of San Diego County. The orange line is what SDG&E thinks that the total load in San Diego County is going to be in 2030. This difference is enough to justify a new transmission line to San Diego County, which is billions of dollars. This line is what we could hold the load in San Diego County, the peak load into San Diego County, if 20% of the vehicles in San Diego County were V to H capable EVs, that's bidirectional EVs. And that's a 14% reduction in peak load. And remember, the local CCAs have to buy resource adequacy. And the amount of resource adequacy they have to buy is proportional to their peak load. So what this is telling us, it would be worthwhile to the local CCAs to somehow encourage their customers to have bidirectional EVs and bidirectional chargers at home. So in the evening, they could give up some of their charge to avoid having to have a peak load in San Diego in the evening, so that they wouldn't have to pay as much resource adequacy charge. So it's not only a win for the customers because they avoid paying the most expensive electricity rates in the evening, it's actually a win for the CCAs because they could avoid paying resource adequacy charges, which have gotten very expensive. Interestingly, I can't get any of the CCAs to tell me what resource adequacy charges are. It's a closely held secret. But they keep telling me it's burdensome and getting more expensive. So the question is, when are we going to get bidirectional EVs? At the moment, I think there's two that are on the market. There's the Leaf and there's the Lightning, and there's a couple more that I'm told are just about to arrive. Basically, all the auto manufacturers, everybody, including Tesla, says we're gonna real soon now have bidirectional EVs. And you know, there's legislation on the governor's desk right now to not exactly require it, but to give state agencies the authority to require it. And there's legislation in Congress to require it. So here's an interesting graph on the right. The leftmost bar is California's, what the CPUC thinks is the requirement for stationary capacity. Oh, I'm missing my label. That's kilowatt hours. To balance the grid in the evening with stationary batteries that would belong to the utilities. The center bar is the capacity of the sum of the capacity of all the batteries in battery vehicles, EVs, that are currently on the road in California. There's already more batteries and EVs currently on the road in California than we would need to manage the grid in 2030. The right-hand bar is what the capacity of battery electric vehicles would be in 2030 if the state meets its goals of having 8 million vehicles, of which 5.8 would be full battery electrics as opposed to hybrids. It'd be many times what's needed to manage the duck curve. So why are all the manufacturers not making bidirectional vehicles right now? And the answer, it turns out, is a regulatory problem. And here's the issue that's going on. There's a lot of interest in having battery electric vehicles be part of virtual power plants. And this is the model of a virtual power plant. The concept would be that the utility sort of takes control of your charger while the vehicle's plugged in. And so you, with your interface, tell the utility, you know, what you want, how much charge you're willing to give up, what you expect to get paid for it, you know, whether you need the vehicle right away or not till tomorrow, and so on and so forth. And there's some kind of artificial intelligence running in the cloud or someplace, which is taking into account the energy market, how much energy is available, what it costs, and telling the vehicle whether it can charge or should discharge, and presumably having some scheme whereby you get paid, hopefully in some, fair manner for what you give up and when you charge and when you discharge. And the schema should, be favorable to you such that you get paid more for what you discharge than what you charge. But the key issue that's creating a problem is that all this information, of course, travels over the web. And a standard has already been written by the International Standards Organization for the communication of all this financial data. And the people who are experts in cybersecurity, having seen this standard, objected to it because they felt that the degree of encryption was inadequate for modern cybersecurity. And therefore, the ISO decided that they were going to have an amendment to the -20 standard to beef up the cybersecurity. So what's been going on is the state has been trying for more than a year now to mandate that charger manufacturers and vehicle manufacturers should implement 15118-20. And they're getting pushback on the grounds that the standard isn't finalized. And therefore, nobody wants to make a product in implementing that standard for fear it's going to get obsoleted. Or worse, there's the fear that, different people will implement the standard in different ways since it's a kind of incomplete standard. Then you wind up with a situation where, this car can charge at this charging station and not that charging station because there's incompatibilities. So it's holding things up because of the lack of standardization. And this act, I don't expect you to understand this slide because I don't fully, but this is a slide that a crypto security person showed at the last V2G meeting I went to about how difficult it is to secure this stuff. Each of the numbers on this slide is a reference to another slide, even more complicated, showing how many ways there is to attack this schema where you exchange information about billing apps and things. And the key point here is that this business about amending the security standard for implementing virtual power plants is discouraging the manufacturers from releasing bidirectional EVs. So here's the thing. Let's assume in the proposal I was making, I wasn't assuming that when people discharge their vehicle into their home, that they were doing it under utility control. If we just assume that the motivation for doing it is to save energy, then the messaging is the utility rate. So I have an alternate model here where the message from the utility is a non-real-time message. It's just based on the history of the energy market. The CPUC and the utility set the rate. The customer knows what the rates are, and they tell their charger when they want to discharge from the car or charge the car. Presumably they charge the car at work. But no information, no real-time information leaves the customer's house. So there's no need for crypto security because there's no financial messaging traveling over the internet. The point is, the most secure message is the message you don't send. And so this gets around that crypto security problem. So this gets us to what's going on here. The basic idea of can I use my car to power my house? The answer is yes. The CPUC has already issued rules that say I can get a bidirectional charger via DC. You can't do AC, but you can do DC. There's a UL standard for that. And there's a CPUC ruling that says if I get a UL standard charger, I can install it in my house and I can take power out of my car if it's a DC bidirectional car. And actually, theoretically, I can run my meter backwards, although given how little they pay you for that, you probably would just power it into your house. Chargers that meet the standard are coming on the market. The manufacturers of cars are not actually releasing DC capable bidirectional cars. But here's the interesting thing. Despite the specifications, it appears from things that I've been told by experts in the field that existing cars, EVs currently in the market, are actually capable of operating bidirectionally via the DC pins. And there's a German company which has been demonstrating this on multiple models of currently on the market EVs in order to promote their DC charger. So the limitations are actually software. The current controls in cars currently on the market do not have the commands to invoke DC vehicle to grid, even though the car is physically capable of it. Now, the software installed in existing EVs has a loader capable of loading new commands. That's part of the ISO 15108-2 specification, which apparently is installed in almost all current EVs. So recognizing this, the Society of Automotive Engineers has released a new specification, J2847/2, which is for DC vehicle to H. In other words, just the scheme I showed there. And this can be downloaded into existing EVs and make possible the scheme I showed where you're powering a house from the EV. Okay. You don't have to go through the details of this, but this is copied from that standard. On the right, it's showing that fortunately, the people who wrote the base standard included spare slots for loading new protocols. In fact, interestingly, they included 65,000 slots for protocols in the base standard. And there's only like 6 being used right now. So what the people at the Society of Automotive Engineers did is said, okay, we're going to create 2 new protocols. One for vehicle to home when there's no power and when the grid is down, and one for vehicle to home when the grid is in present and you're just avoiding using utility power. And the concept is it's already part of the design of all EV charger interactions, that there's what they call a service discovery phase, where when the charger first plugs in, it goes through a negotiation with the vehicle about what protocols they know. So basically it goes, are you capable of doing a cryptographic transaction? Yes, no. No, you can't do it. Well, can you do it this way? And the concept they're going is the green path here is, well, are you a private charger? Well, if you're a private charger, you're behind the meter, so we don't have to do cryptography. So we're doing vehicle to home. So, okay, you met that criteria. So, okay, well, we can go ahead and do vehicle to home. So the point is, it creates a alternative path where if the charger is behind somebody's meter, it can have a conversation with the car and say, even though we don't have secure cryptography to carry out a financial transaction, since it's behind the meter and we don't have to send any messages, we can go ahead and do it. So basically what that says is, if we're willing to start with local V2H with private chargers, we can have V2H right now and not have to wait for the international standards agencies to fix their problems with the more complicated virtual power plants with complicated financial transactions. if all we're trying to do is play power into our own homes, which is actually the more common use case. So the conclusions I have are the utilities in the CPUC see transportation building electrification as a justification for massive rate increases. We contend that locally owned solar power charging stations serving bidirectional EVs are an option that avoids burdening the ratepayers with all this new cost. The only barriers to the adoption of bidirectional technology in EVs are regulatory, specifically around cybersecurity for virtual power plants. Minor regulatory changes would make V to H possible with private chargers right away, possibly even in existing EVs with software upgrades. This option should be explored immediately because the CPUC is taking decisions that will cost ratepayers billions of dollars right now. And if the only objection is warranties, the state could take actions to overcome the warranty issues. Because left unchecked, these runaway rate increases will lead to ratepayers with the most resources defecting from the grid and leaving those least able to pay with an ever-increasing burden. So what our organization is doing, we're trying to build the business case for locally owned solar panel charging stations to convince businesses that this is a viable thing to do. We're actually designing and getting bids to figure out the actual cost of building such a thing to validate the business case. We're trying to test this concept of making an EV bidirectional by working with local schools and EV hobbyists to actually write the code and actually modify somebody's EV. We're looking for volunteers, by the way, who want their EVs made bidirectional. And we're trying to pitch this to the CPUC. As interveners, we can submit documents to the CPUC. They don't have to do what we say, but they're obligated by law to read what we say. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And for more information, you can go to our website. We have posted, there's information about virtual power plants on our website, and information about this general concept of what the CPUC is doing on transmission costs, and about this issue about daytime charging as opposed to nighttime charging. You can go to another organization we've worked with, Clean Coalition. So I think with that, I will turn it over.
Thank you for watching this presentation from the California Alliance for Community Energy. This concludes the published portion of our monthly call. If you would like to participate in our monthly calls, including Q&A, please consider joining the California Alliance for Community Energy. For more information, you can see our website at cacommunityenergy.org/apply.